Jasmine's usual Friday night routine had been anything but exciting. A long week of work and studying had left her feeling drained, and all she wanted was a chance to unwind. The bar on the corner of her street, the Whiskey Lounge, was where she often retreated after a tough day. Its dim lights, quiet atmosphere, and the hum of soft jazz in the background were exactly what she needed to escape the noise of her hectic life. It was a place where she could blend into the background and just be herself. No expectations, no pressure. But tonight was different. There was a certain buzz in the air, something electric, as if the universe itself was lining up for an encounter. She had just ordered her drink, a vodka cranberry, when the door to the bar swung open. A tall figure stepped inside, his dark hair tousled and his crisp, black suit making him look like he had just walked off a movie set. Professor Min-Ho Park. She didn't know him by name yet, but something about the way he carried himself caught her attention. His presence in the room seemed to make everything else fade into the background. She glanced at him for a moment, those dark, brooding eyes, the confident yet humble air about him. He was striking, with a quiet intensity that drew her in. For the next few minutes, she tried to shake off the pull she felt, but her curiosity got the better of her. He was sitting at the bar, ordering a drink in fluent Korean. His accent was subtle but unmistakable, hinting at his heritage. He wasn't like the typical crowd at the bar, and that intrigued her even more. Just then, their eyes met. There was no denying it, an undeniable spark, a moment of connection that neither could explain. She quickly turned her attention back to her drink, but she could feel his gaze lingering on her, studying her, maybe as intrigued by her as she was by him. As if by fate, Min-Ho suddenly got up to leave, but before he could exit, he stopped. His voice was low, confident, and with a slight, amused smile, he turned to her. "Are you always this serious, or just tonight?" he asked. Lydia blinked in surprise, her pulse quickening. She hadn't expected him to talk to her, let alone initiate a conversation. "Just tonight," she answered, giving him a playful grin. "How about a change of scenery then?" he suggested, his smile widening. "We can have a proper drink and make the night a bit more interesting." Her first instinct was to turn him down. This wasn't her usual style. She wasn't the type to throw caution to the wind, but something about him felt different. Min-Ho's confident presence was a magnet, pulling her in. Without thinking much, she nodded. And so, the night began. As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about everything and nothing at the same time. He shared stories of his life in Seoul, his transition to the States, and his love for teaching. Jasmine, in turn, told him about her work, her ambitions, and how she was trying to balance life in a world where people often expected her to conform to their ideals. The chemistry between them grew stronger with every word, every laugh. The world around them seemed to disappear. A few hours later, the bar was closing. Neither of them wanted the night to end, but the reality of it loomed ahead. They stood on the street outside the bar, facing each other. The cold night air wrapped around them, but neither cared. Min-Ho stepped closer, his hand gently touching her arm, sending a ripple of warmth through her. "Do you want to come with me?" he asked, his voice steady, but with a hint of uncertainty. Jasmine hesitated, her mind racing. Was this a mistake? Was she throwing caution to the wind for something she might regret? But the pull was too strong, the moment too perfect. Without saying a word, she nodded, and they walked together to his apartment, each step a mix of curiosity, excitement, and perhaps a little fear. Once inside, the tension between them became palpable. There was no denying what was about to happen. The attraction, the connection, it was undeniable. The night was filled with passion, a fire that burned between them. They didn't know each other's names beyond the basics, but it didn't matter. It was a night of reckless desire, the kind of night that could only be justified by the rush of the moment. By morning it was over, and they said their goodbyes with no promises made, no commitments. They were strangers, after all, just two people who had shared an unforgettable night. Neither of them expected to see the other again. But fate had other plans. The sound of the professor's voice was a distant hum as Jasmine tried to focus on the lecture in front of her. It was Monday morning, and the classroom was packed, but all she could do was stare at the chalkboard, trying to will away the memories of the night she spent with Professor Min-Ho Park. Her heart pounded in her chest, each passing second feeling heavier than the last. She had hoped, prayed even that the morning would feel normal, that this would be like any other class, just another boring Monday. But as soon as she walked into the lecture hall and saw him standing at the front of the room, the entire night replayed in her mind. Min-Ho wasn't just a stranger she met at a bar anymore. He was her professor, and they had crossed a line, an invisible line that now felt like an ocean between them. The tension between them was thick, unspoken. Min-Ho's gaze flickered to her as he began his lecture, and Jasmine quickly looked away, her cheeks burning. He hadn't acknowledged their night together. In fact, he seemed to be going out of his way to treat her like just another student. But Jasmine wasn't so sure. Did he remember everything? Or was he pretending it didn't happen? Did it mean anything to him? Or was she just another woman to him? She couldn't help but notice the slight tension in his posture. His shoulders were stiff, his gaze focused on the textbook in his hands, avoiding her eyes when she glanced up at him. Was it possible that he regretted that night? Jasmine's stomach twisted with uncertainty. She was trying to stay calm, trying to focus on the lecture, but her mind kept drifting back to their night together. Every word he spoke seemed to carry a weight now, a weight that only she could feel. The room, filled with the murmurs of classmates taking notes, suddenly felt like an echo chamber, amplifying her nervousness. She couldn't concentrate, not with him in front of her. He was so close, yet so far away. Min-Ho's gaze met hers again, but this time he didn't look away. There was something in his eyes, something she couldn't quite read. Was it guilt, regret, or was it just the professional barrier he was trying to maintain? After class, the tension was unbearable. Jasmine quickly gathered her things, hoping to leave without encountering him. But as she headed for the door, Min-Ho's voice stopped her. "Jasmine," he said softly, his tone serious but not unfriendly. She froze, her heart racing. "I need to speak with you," he continued, his gaze never leaving hers. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. I have to go," she stammered, her voice betraying her nervousness. She wasn't ready for this conversation, not yet. But Min-Ho stepped forward, blocking her path. "I won't take much of your time," he said, his voice quieter now, almost apologetic. "Just a moment." Reluctantly, she sat back down, her mind racing. Was he going to acknowledge their night together? Was he going to pretend it didn't happen? Min-Ho took a seat beside her, the space between them uncomfortably small. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I want to make sure there's no confusion, Jasmine," he said, his voice steady. "That night, I don't know if it meant the same thing to you, but I want to make sure it doesn't affect your studies." Jasmine swallowed hard, the air thick with the weight of his words. She looked up at him, her chest tight. It was just one night," she said, trying to sound composed, though her heart was still racing. "It doesn't have to affect anything." Min-Ho's gaze softened, and he leaned in slightly. "I don't want things to be awkward between us, but I also don't want you to think this changes anything in my class," he said. "You're a student, Jasmine. I'm your professor. That's all this is." His words stung, but she couldn't tell if it was the truth or just his way of distancing himself. It was exactly what she needed to hear, what she wanted to hear. Yet, the way he said it, with such seriousness and control, made her question his sincerity. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her mind was a whirlwind. Did she believe him? Did he really think it was just a mistake, something that could be wiped away and forgotten? Min-Ho stood up and gave her a small, almost apologetic smile. "Good. Let's keep it professional. We're both adults here, and I trust you'll act accordingly." He walked toward the door without waiting for her response, leaving her staring at the empty classroom, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Was he pretending not to care? Or had it really been nothing to him? The question lingered in her mind, unanswered. The weeks following the awkward encounter in the classroom felt like a constant battle for Jasmine. Every time she entered Min-Ho's lecture hall, the weight of their shared past lingered in the air between them. She had to remind herself every day that this was just a class and Min-Ho was just a professor, nothing more. No matter how badly her heart raced whenever their eyes met across the lecture hall, or how his voice sent a flutter of excitement through her every time he addressed her directly. Jasmine was doing her best to keep things professional, to not let her emotions cloud her focus on her studies. She had been excelling in her other classes, but in Min-Ho's class, everything felt different. His presence commanded attention, and every lecture felt like a test of her willpower. Could she maintain control, or would she give in to the growing attraction between them? But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't ignore the way Min-Ho's gaze lingered on her just a little too long whenever they crossed paths, or how his voice seemed to soften when addressing her, as though his role as a professor was almost forgotten, even if only for a moment. That day in class, as Min-Ho spoke about a complicated historical topic, Jasmine found herself tuning out the lecture. His words faded into the background, and she focused instead on the way his hands moved as he wrote on the chalkboard. His tailored suit, his sharp jawline, and the subtle way he brushed his hair back. He had this way of being distant, yet somehow also close, an enigma that seemed impossible to unravel. She snapped herself out of her trance when she noticed that Min-Ho had stopped speaking and was looking directly at her. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly averted her gaze, but not before she caught the slight shift in his expression. His usual confident demeanor wavered for just a second, almost like he was waiting for her to acknowledge something unspoken. The bell rang, signaling the end of the class, but Jasmine remained seated, mentally exhausted from the tension. She gathered her books slowly, trying to avoid making eye contact with Min-Ho, but before she could leave, his voice cut through the air again. "Jasmine," he called gently, his voice still carrying that familiar authority. "Could you stay for a moment?" Her stomach flipped, a mix of excitement and dread swirling within her. She nodded and walked up to his desk, trying to appear calm, though her heart was beating loudly in her chest. When she reached the front, Min-Ho motioned for her to sit across from him. "I noticed you've been distracted during class lately," he began, his tone casual, but with a hint of concern. "Is everything all right? You seem off." Jasmine hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She could feel the pull between them, the desire to confess the truth, how distracted she was by him, how she couldn't seem to escape the memory of their night together. But she couldn't. Not here. Not now. Not when she was trying so hard to maintain her professionalism. "I'm fine, Professor," she said, forcing a smile. "Just a lot on my plate with other assignments." He studied her for a moment, his brow furrowed slightly, as if he wasn't convinced by her answer. Then he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Jasmine," he said, his voice softer now, "you don't have to pretend. I know what it's like to feel torn between personal and professional boundaries. We both know there's something between us, but I need you to understand that I can't let it interfere with my role here, and I'm sure you feel the same way." Jasmine swallowed hard. He was right. She couldn't ignore what had happened, but she couldn't let it dictate her future, her career, or their professional relationship. She had always been determined, driven, and focused, but now those traits felt like they were slipping through her fingers whenever Min-Ho was near. "Of course, I understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I respect your position, and I don't want to make things difficult. I'll keep my focus where it belongs, on my studies." There was a long silence between them as he looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as if he was looking for something deeper. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully before he spoke again. "I've been in your position before," Min-Ho said quietly. "The pull of something you can't control, the temptation to cross lines you promised never to cross. But you have to understand that there are consequences to every action." His words felt like a warning, but it didn't stop the ache in Jasmine's chest. The longing for something more, something forbidden, was hard to push away. Min-Ho stood up slowly, his voice firm as he addressed her once more. "Let's keep this professional, Jasmine. I don't want either of us to regret anything." As he walked past her, his presence lingered, leaving a trail of tension in the air. Jasmine sat there, her hands clenched on her notebook, trying to fight back the wave of emotion that was threatening to overtake her. Min-Ho was right. She needed to focus, but the weight of their shared night, the undeniable chemistry, was getting harder to ignore. The tension between Jasmine and Professor Min-Ho Park had grown palpable. Every encounter, every glance seemed charged with more unspoken words, more feelings neither of them could deny. The classroom, once a neutral space, had become a battleground for their emotions. Each lecture felt like a struggle, Jasmine doing her best to keep her attention on the subject, Min-Ho doing his best to maintain professional boundaries. But the moment their eyes met, something shifted. That day in class, the atmosphere was more electric than ever. The topic of discussion was ethics in academia, a subject that naturally made Jasmine's mind wander, not to the textbook in front of her, but to the ethical dilemma she now found herself in. The debate grew heated, and as usual, Min-Ho's voice cut through the tension with precision and authority. But Jasmine couldn't focus. Every word felt like it was directed at her. Every glance from him was a silent invitation, a call she couldn't ignore. At the end of the class, the students packed up their things, some chattering amongst themselves, others rushing to their next class. Min-Ho had begun to gather his papers, his mind clearly somewhere else. But before he could leave, Jasmine found herself standing up, her legs almost moving without her permission. "Professor Park," she called out, her voice firm, though her hands were trembling. He turned, surprised, as the classroom emptied, leaving only the two of them standing there. The familiar awkwardness between them hung in the air, but something else was there too, something undeniably magnetic. "Yes, Jasmine?" Min-Ho asked, his voice softer than usual. He stepped closer, his eyes locking with hers in a way that made her heart race. I need to talk to you," she said, struggling to keep her composure. "About what happened last time. I can't keep pretending it didn't happen." There it was, the confession they had both been avoiding. The very thing they had danced around for weeks was now out in the open. Min-Ho didn't say anything at first, his gaze still fixed on her, as though he were processing her words. The silence between them stretched long, too long. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet, almost vulnerable. "I know, Jasmine. I've been trying to avoid it too. But every time I look at you, I can't pretend it didn't happen either." A heavy pause followed, and Jasmine took a step closer, her breath shallow. She could feel the chemistry between them, thick and undeniable, like a weight in the air. This was it, the moment that would define everything. "I've been trying so hard to ignore this," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "But every time I'm in this room with you, I feel something that I can't shake off. I don't want to complicate things, but I can't keep pretending it's nothing." Min-Ho's eyes softened, and he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I know. I've been fighting it too. But Jasmine, this isn't just some fleeting attraction. It's deeper than that." The words hung in the air, and Jasmine could feel the heat rising between them. Before she knew it, Min-Ho gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheek in a tender, almost reverent way. His touch sent a shiver down her spine. For a moment, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. The world outside seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them in that intimate space. The walls, the desks, the books, they all faded into the background. "I don't want to hurt you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But I don't think I can fight this anymore, Jasmine. I don't want to hurt myself either." Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up at him, the intensity of his words washing over her. She had never felt this vulnerable in her life, yet with him, she couldn't help but feel safe, safe enough to lean into him, to close the distance between them. Before either of them could stop it, their lips met in a kiss that was soft at first, as if both of them were testing the waters, unsure if this was the right thing to do. But as the kiss deepened, the urgency and the longing became undeniable. They pulled each other closer, both of them finally giving into the connection they had tried so hard to suppress. The kiss broke, but neither of them stepped away. Min-Ho rested his forehead against hers, his breath ragged. "What are we doing, Jasmine?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jasmine looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I don't want to walk away from this. Not again." Min-Ho nodded slowly, his hand still resting on her cheek. "Neither do I." The next few days felt like a whirlwind of confusion and emotion for Jasmine. After their private moment in the classroom, she couldn't stop thinking about Min-Ho, his touch, his kiss. It all seemed like something from a dream. But this wasn't a dream. It was real, and it was happening. Every time she walked into his class, the weight of what had occurred between them hung heavily in the air. He was still the same Professor Min-Ho Park to everyone else, but to her, he was so much more. Their connection was undeniable, and no amount of pretending could change that. But Jasmine couldn't ignore the consequences. She had always been focused, disciplined, and in control of her life. She wasn't the type of person to throw everything away on impulse. And yet, that was exactly what this was, a risk, a dangerous one. The university had clear boundaries about relationships between professors and students. Min-Ho could lose everything, his career, his reputation, everything he had worked for, gone in an instant. And Jasmine, as much as she tried to push it aside, had to face the reality that this could lead to nothing but heartbreak. She hadn't seen him since their kiss, and it was starting to eat at her. Min-Ho had been distant, giving her space to process the night. But that didn't make the situation any easier. Jasmine knew it wasn't just about her feelings anymore. It was about their futures. The tension reached its peak when Min-Ho emailed her later that afternoon. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." Her hand shook as she opened the message, reading the brief content. "Jasmine, I know this is complicated, and I know we need to be careful about how we move forward, but we can't keep pretending like nothing happened. Please meet me after class tomorrow. I want to discuss what's next." Her heart pounded as she closed her laptop. The truth was, she wanted to meet him. She wanted to know where this was going, even if it scared her. But the risk, the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. The next day, Jasmine found herself pacing outside Min-Ho's office, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. She could hear the faint sound of footsteps approaching, and her breath hitched in her throat. Min-Ho stood in front of her, dressed in his usual professional attire, but the intensity in his eyes told a different story. He looked at her with a mixture of longing and guilt, as though he, too, was battling his own emotions. "I thought about this for days," he said, his voice low but steady. "The risks, the consequences, what it could mean for both of us. I don't want to put you in a position where you feel pressured, Jasmine, but I also can't deny what's between us. I can't pretend it's nothing." Jasmine's voice trembled as she replied, "And I can't pretend it's nothing either. But the truth is, I don't know what to do with this. With you. With us." She paused, meeting his gaze. "You're my professor. I'm your student. This could ruin everything for both of us." Min-Ho's expression softened as he stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "I know the risks. I'm not blind to them. But there's something about you, Jasmine. You've been on my mind constantly. I'm not asking for you to make any decisions now, but I need you to know that I'm willing to take the risk if you are." The air between them thickened with intensity, their proximity making the tension almost unbearable. Jasmine felt her pulse quicken. The desire, the pull toward him was too strong to ignore. But she was torn. Was she willing to risk everything for something that might not last? Min-Ho's voice broke through her thoughts. "Jasmine, if we're going to do this, we need to be honest with each other. No more running. No more pretending. This is something real, something we both want." Jasmine took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had always been a planner, someone who thought ahead, considered every possibility. But in this moment, she realized that sometimes love wasn't about planning. It was about taking a leap of faith. "Okay," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm in. But we have to do this carefully. We can't let anyone find out." Min-Ho nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "We'll figure it out. Together." The moment they shared was electric, and Jasmine knew that from here on out, there would be no turning back. Thanks for watching Folks Tales by Queen Dora, and stay tuned for the next episode. Please don't forget to click on the subscription button.